Hello, can you hear me? This is Diana from BTS. Welcome to our first appointment. Today we are talking about the new functional protocols with BTS wearable sensor. And so I'm very happy to share with you this information. Okay, let's start. The first meeting between the clinician and the patient is the essentials moment in which the clinician is asked to decide what kind of techniques to use for the treatment of the patient. The clinician takes advantage of different tools to start his clinical decision on the patient, of course. Surely the conversation with the patient is important to start the fact-finding survey of the patient and to collect all the information necessary to define the medical history. But even more important is the objective physical exam of the patient motor behavior, which includes a global functional assessment of the patient. The functional protocols included in the software package offered by BTS analysis system allow to perform from a district evaluation of different body segments up to a complete global assessment of the patient so that the clinician can formulate his own functional diagnosis. That is, the identification of the main movement disorders, the residual potentialities, and any compensation strategy. All these objective and quantitative data together allow the clinician to set the most effective personalized therapy for the patient, and in the post-treatment to highlight the benefit of the performed therapy. The BTS technology that allows to apply on the patient the functional evaluation protocols used both in clinical and sport fields is made up of wearable sensors that guarantee a quick, precise, and effective measure of specific parameters that quantify and characterize the patient's motor skills. The wearable sensors include 3mg electromyography probes and G-sensor inertial sensor. The EMG probes allow to perform a dynamic and non-invasive functional evaluation of the activation status of the muscle chains, providing information about the moment, duration, and amplitude of muscle activation during the movement execution. The total absence of cables and the lightness of the probes guarantee a very quick preparation of the patient who is completely free to move with maximum comfort. The small size and weight of the probes allow to perform the EMG analysis on each body district during any movement without altering the patient's motor pattern in any way. G-sensor is an inertial sensor that allows to perform a kinematic evaluation of the movement. Thus, it provides the acceleration and speed values of the specific motor task performed and the time events that allow the division of the movement into various subphases within the muscular behavior is analyzed. The integration of these two technologies combined with the development of the functional protocols has led to the creation of real solutions dedicated to the clinics. Among the functional protocols, we find the walk protocol dedicated to the evaluation of walking, the static posture protocol for the postural evaluation, the flex-relax protocol for the analysis of the lumbar spine section, the shoulder mobility protocol for the analysis of the shoulder joint, the cervical spine mobility protocol for the evaluation of the cervical spine section, and lastly, the dental occlusion protocol for the temporal mandibular joint examination. Now I'm going to give a synthetic description of each protocol, but I will not go in details because during our upcoming appointments, we will dedicate a webinar to each functional protocol. By the way, thanks to the walk protocol, it's possible to verify if the muscle activity, mainly of the lower limbs muscles, of course, follows the physiological behavior. And therefore, it's possible to understand if the patient has a good coordination and symmetry of the movement, or if due to neurological or orthopedic disorders, the walking is compromised and altered in some of its phases. The protocol returns the evaluation indexes of symmetry and the quality of the gait cycle. The main temporal parameters of the gait cycle, such as duration of the stance phase, of the swing phase, of the single and double support phases, the cadence, and so on. Then we have the three-dimensional kinematics of the pelvis, or in other words, the assessment of the movement that the pelvis performs on the three planes of the body, sagittal, frontal, and transversal, during the execution of the right and the left gait cycle. Finally, we have the muscle activation timing and the co-activation index of agonist and antagonist muscles, which allows to evaluate the patient coordination. Now, let's move on to the static posture protocol. The static posture protocol allows us to evaluate the muscular strategy adapted by the patient in order to maintain a static posture over time. Surely, the most common condition in which to perform the examination is the orthostatic posture, but the assessment can be made to verify the muscular strategies to maintain isometric conditions of any other posture. The protocol provides indexes that allow us to evaluate if homologous muscles of the two sides of the trunk, both at front and back, are working to maintain the posture in a symmetric way. For instance, during the assessment of scoliotic attitude, even before that radiological examination can show bone alteration, the EMG exam could already bring out an asymmetry in the activation of the trunk muscles. Now, here we have the flex-relax protocol. This protocol allows to verify the presence or absence of the correct relaxation phenomenon that the muscles of the lumbar spine should have at the end of an anterior flexion movement of the trunk. In this way, it's possible to evaluate the patient predisposition to the low back pain, and so to prevent the onset. The result of the test is shown automatically by an easy-to-read clinical report, in which, through two synthetic indexes, it's possible to immediately assess how the muscles work in performing the anterior flexion movement, and if the relaxation phenomenon occurred when the trunk has reached and kept the maximum anterior bending position. The shoulder mobility protocol is dedicated to assess the patient capability to perform a flowing and simple flexion, abduction, and rotation movement of the arm, in order to point out the presence of muscular disorders related to the shoulder joint. The protocol returns a report that allows the evaluation of the shoulder kinematics in terms of range of motion, that is the maximum angle reached by the arm during the execution of the specific movement. Moreover, we find some indexes that measure the smoothness of the movement. And lastly, we can evaluate the muscle coordination in terms of activation timing of each muscle within the movement cycle, as well as the percentage of each muscle contribution during the movement performance. Similarly to what we have just seen related to the shoulder mobility protocol, the cervical spine mobility protocol evaluates the patient's ability to perform a flex, extension, lateral bending, and rotation movement both on the right and left side. Any possible muscle contracture or any disorder at the cervical spine level can move into objective limitation of the spine movement. In the report, the protocol provides the kinematic data, and in particular, it points out not only the range of motion on a specific plane, but also the possible angular compensation on the other two planes, on which theoretically there should not be any movement contribution. About the muscle work, we find the energy contribution that each muscle gives out in the different subphases of the movement. Symmetry indexes are also calculated, which highlight the patient ability to use right and left muscles in the same way while performing the movement. Finally, we arrive at the dental occlusion protocol dedicated to the temporal mandibular joint, which allows to analyze the neuromuscular balance of the main masticatory muscles responsible for the dental occlusion. Through a very quick 5-second test in which the patient is asked to make a maximum isometric clenching, firstly on cotton rolls and then on teeth, it's immediately possible to understand by synthetic indexes if the muscles are in balance, and if, therefore, the patient has a correct occlusal barycenter. Now, at the end of the presentation of all the functional protocols, let me stress again the importance and above all the great advantages that can be obtained by using the functional protocols. The benefits are for the clinician as well as for the patient. For the clinician, in addition to the clear advantage of having quantitative and objective information that helps to better understand the patient's motor behavior, the use of this technological solution allows the clinician to make explicit the need of treatment that leads the patient to become loyal to the clinician, and at the same time all that contributes to increase the profitability of the study. Of course, even the patient can take advantages. Surely the most important aspect is that the patient is put at ease during the execution of the test, because the technology allows to move in total freedom and with maximum comfort. The tests are very fast and the contents of the reports are easy to read, even for the patient, who can therefore find satisfaction and motivation to perform the test. Okay, I have finished, but before saying goodbye, I have the pleasure of inviting you to set these dates for our upcoming webinars, which, as I said, will be dedicated to explore in details each protocol. But for all of you, there is also this stimulating venture. If you attend at least 3 of the next webinars and answer correctly to a simple questionnaire that will be proposed at the end of the webinar, you can receive the certificate of attendance released by BTS Engineering. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope to see you soon on our next appointment. And now, if you have some questions, please write me by chat and we will discuss together. Okay, bye-bye.